There we go. So, well, let's get this show rolling so we can honor the time for the day. Hey, it's the Trigger, Rich Bontrager. Welcome to another How to Rock the Virtual Stage. Today, a special midday coffee edition for us. Every so often, we're changing it up from the nighttime to the daytime, and just one of those perfect opportunities today. I've already gone through all my coffee. I can't have any more, so it's not going to be good. So I'm doing water during the midday coffee. Grab a drink, grab yourself your brown bag, whatever you're doing today, and join us in here today. We're all about coaching you up here at the virtual stage. I want to help you do the best you can to bring whatever you need to bear to life, to improve your skills as a speaker, as a leader, as a coach. And with COVID-19 and with the advent of everything going on, the virtual stage is huge right now. Everyone is trying to figure out how they present, to teach, to coach, to do school, to do church. Everything is on the virtual stage, and I'm sharing my 30 years of broadcast experience to help equip people, and I'm bringing great experts on the virtual stage from a wide array, and today we're going to talk about the sole entrepreneur, the individual that's trying to do it all by themselves, like me, and until you get big enough to get other people. Steve Coombes, a.k.a. the sole entrepreneur, the solopreneur coach, recognized from a very young age the power of self-employment to transform people and careers in life. He took, however, some failed opportunities along the way to learn a little bit more about what it means to do well with a company of one, me, myself, and I. We're going to talk about that today. He has built a successful business as a writer, as a coach, as a speaker. He's given up the corporate cubicle, and now he works from home virtually like the rest of us. Today, Steve is a popular instructor, podcast host, solopreneur coach, and he has a vision. Get this. He has a vision to help 1 million more people reach their dreams outside the traditional path of the regular corporate office world. 1 million. I'm one of those. One important aspect of the business success is a relationship. It's all about relationship. And you're about to improve those abilities, those skills. You're about ready to have a great hour with us. The first 30 minutes, co-coaching with Steve and I. The second is going to be your open microphone chance for Q&A to really apply it to yourself. So strap it on, and let's welcome Steve Coombes to the virtual stage today. Great to see you again, Steve.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Rich. Long time no see. It was just yesterday you're on my community. That was awesome to have you on there talking about the virtual stage. And that's what we're here doing, is helping folks out. We both have the same goals there.
I love reading bios, and I love reading back history. So before we dive into what you have for us today to help us do this thing better as solopreneurs, failed business opportunities turns into new successes. I've been through it. You've been through it. Probably other solopreneurs have. So let's just start there for a second. The pain of tragedy birthed something new. Tell us a little about your story and how you got there.
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to be a business owner. My parents were both entrepreneurs in a sense, but they were kind of following the AWAI route, you know. And as a kid, I would be listening to the motivational tapes more than they did. Like, yeah, I'm going to be a millionaire by 21. Yeah, it didn't quite happen that way. But I had a series of failures, really false starts, not really so much failures, but learning experiences the way I see it today. And these were businesses that really didn't make any money or made a little bit of money, but didn't ever perform the way I hoped. And the truth of the matter is, what really got me to where I want to be is finding something that was a good fit for me and getting support along the way. And that's the funny thing about solopreneurs is we're fiercely independent creatures. It's like, I want to be me, I want to do my own thing. But at the same time, you want to learn from those who've gone before. And that's something that I've learned the hard way more than once. But I've also learned that lesson well. So now I take advantage of resources and introductions and mentors and coaches and training programs. And yes, you can chase the shiny wheel forever and never get anywhere in your business. That's another problem, but we could talk about that another day probably. That could be a seminar in itself, right? But the thing is I did find a route that got me to where I wanted to be, full-time solopreneurship. Back in 2009, I was laid off from my full-time job at a Fortune 1000 company as an IT guy, and I drove home with a smile. Half my company's IT force got laid off. I'm probably the only guy driving home that, yeah, I can't wait to get home. I'm full-time now. So this is great. But at the same time, it was challenging. We still had challenges to face as a family because I did not have a big savings account. I did not have my income replaced yet, but I was committed and made it happen. And since then, I've been blessed to help a lot of people along that same journey, both in writing as a copywriter. I'm also an instructor for copywriters, but also in other areas, just helping folks get their feet under them and get growing as a business owner. So that's kind of the backstory. I hope that answers that question well.
Oh yeah, no. Again, just to have a backdrop is many solopreneurs come out of, especially right now, the downside, where they got laid off or where they got bumped off or where it was a medical thing. Like in my case, the medical world changed me and put me back into this broadcasting field again at a higher level. And so there's so many reasons why we step off. But the number one common denominator, and I want to see if you believe this is true or not, yes or no. Passion is the number one running force behind solo entrepreneurs.
Passion is key because that gives you the drive and determination to keep going when times get tough. But you have to have a vision. You have to have a goal. You need to have the right direction, because if you're trying to get north and you're driving east, you're never going to get there. You're just going to keep going around the equator, right? You want to get to see Santa Claus, you got to go north. So that's the key too. You got to have the right direction, the right vehicle to get there. You're not going to get through the snow with a bicycle probably very far. So
vision, passion, and then you have to have the execution plan. You have to have. I always describe it. A lot of solopreneurs get up and they're flying at 30,000 feet and they're assembling the air in mid-flight. It doesn't work well. What you need to do is take that passion and your plan and assemble it before you go too far off and launch it too off. Tell us about that process. Tell us about how to launch well as a solopreneur, first of all.
Yeah, great question. Really, here's the thing. I don't believe you have to know everything to get started, but you do need to have a ground basis of something. If I want to become a copywriter, I needed to know how to write copy, at least to a certain level of efficiency and competency is the word I'm looking for, a certain level of competency to serve my clients well. If you are a business owner, your job is to solve somebody's problem. And the problem I was solving is how do you get more sales? And how do you get those sales through specifically sales letters or video sales letters or emails or whatever I'm writing that day? You have to know how to do the base skills. And that's part of that process. But at the same time, one nice thing about being a solopreneur is you're agile. You don't have to go through a whole committee of, oh, do we want to make this decision? And 6 months later, you might actually get to the board of directors and they might make a decision after 12 months. By that time, the solopreneurs ate your lunch because they can twist on a dime and all of a sudden they're starting the new next Twitter or Facebook or something, right? Or whatever the next big thing is. Those are solopreneurs typically that make these, or sometimes they're, you're a couple of guys in the garage kind of situation or the kitchen table. Look, I literally started my copywriting journey at my kitchen table, dining room table. The computer's here, my notebook's here, my materials of study is over here to make sure I didn't miss anything. And you just roll with it and you grow. You don't have to be perfect to start, but you do have to have that foundation, like you said. So yeah, that kind of a little bit of both.
So as public speakers, as coaches, which we both are, let's drill down specifically into that niche of this solopreneur area. What are the things that help us as speakers and coaches to really build the business, to grow the business, to get it to be rock solid?
Okay, well, here's something I'll tell any solopreneur, whether it's a speaker, whether it's a coach, whether it's a writer, a photographer, whatever you're doing. This doesn't just apply to solopreneurs. I tell them they need three things in order to be effective at getting their business off the ground. And here they are really in a nutshell. Number one, you have to know who you're selling to. That's your niche or your market, your industry, your vertical, whatever word you want to call it. That's who you're talking to. Number two, you need to have a sound offer, something that solves a key problem that they're willing to pay money to solve. And three, your USP, your unique selling point. How do you solve that differently, better, less expensively? Although I don't like to get in that game of trying to race to the bottom of the pool. But what's your USP? What makes you unique? How can you solve their problem differently than anyone else? And often for the solopreneur, it's the branding of yourself. How do your unique background, experiences, how does that play into making a unique difference in that company's fortunes or that individual's problem? Because sometimes you're selling to consumers, sometimes you're selling B2B. Depends who you're selling to. But either way, you need those three things: who you're talking to, what you're offering, and what makes you different. Those are the three things.
I would add a fourth one. Let's see what you think about this. What's your secret sauce? We have a lot of people doing the same things. We're coaches, we're speakers, we're leadership people. But what's your secret sauce? And it goes back, I think, to what makes you unique. What is that uniqueness that brings in, that changes it up? Uh, so what's the secret sauce for Steve?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say that your secret sauce really is the USP. That is your third of the three, because that is what makes you unique, right? That's what the U for a unique selling point. What makes me unique is I've actually been through the road of failure. I've been through the road of succeeding in the midst of a great recession, because I got laid off in middle of 2009. I literally signed the lease on a new rental the day before I got laid off, not knowing I was going to be laid off tomorrow. I signed the lease. I had several children at home. My wife's pregnant with number 7. And all of a sudden, right after that happens, I also, she goes into the hospital with all kinds of complications. And I'm trying to build a business next to her hospital bed while my mom came in from out of state to watch the rest of the kids. I know what the challenges are like. I also know what it's like to reach a level of success and get complacent and watch your business take a nosedive financially after you've been successful, after you've been held up as a success story in the industry, which happened to me. And kind of the secret, dirty secret that Steve Coombes had is I had a couple years of big struggles to the point where I had to borrow money from my grandpa in order to keep the rent payments going.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of embarrassing, but I've come out the other side of that. So I know all those things. A lot of it has to do with mindset. A lot of it has to do with how do you approach things. And what my secret sauce is I can relate to people that are in those shoes and different areas of their business journey. And I can actually approach it from an outsider's perspective, having been through that and succeeded in spite of those challenges. That gives me the opportunity to help people that maybe they're following that path, and maybe I can help get out of the potholes a little bit faster.
Well, let's give them nuts and bolts. What are some of the nuts and bolts for sole entrepreneurs in this certain bubble of time we're in, virtual and COVID? How do you continue to leverage, move forward, and build in advance when you can't do the handshakes, when you can't do the large room meetings, when you can't do certain things, but you can do it virtually? As a solopreneur, you're creating, you're producing, you're videoing, you're tweeting, you're doing all these things. So break it down for us. What's some good ABCs here?
All right, here's my number one ABC. All that content generation, fantastic. But you can spin your wheels all day long. And I'm a writer, and yet I'm going to tell you right now, you can spend too much time creating content that gets you nowhere. And you can feel like you're just sending it off into the void. Nobody's reading it, nobody's seeing it, nobody's hearing it, and you're just spinning your wheels. You're not going anywhere. Here's what it boils down to. Here's what you need. And I'm just going to tell you one thing: relationships. If you don't have strong relationships with people, you're going to have a tough road. It's not that you can't succeed. Yes, you can spend a lot of money on pay-per-click ads and social media ads and whatever you want to do. You can do the content mill, and you could produce fantastic content that 3 people see, or you could go out there and one-on-one build relationships with real people. And virtual networking, speaking of virtual, I've been doing live networking for some time, but I've personally found virtual networking to be a phenomenal way to grow relationships, even better. Because I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I'm actually the kind of guy where you go to those live events and everybody's networking, and I'm kind of like sitting by the wall saying, maybe that guy will walk away from everybody else and I'll just approach one person. I'm not real comfortable just walking up in a big crowd of people and just starting the conversation. I'm more the one-on-one and wallflower type. That's just me in person. I can be brash on stage. I can be brash one-on-one like you and I are talking here. But that's the thing with virtual networking. When you're in a virtual networking environment, typically, and I'm just going to explain it for those who haven't done virtual networking, typically you have a group of people that come to like a Zoom meeting. It's a big room. You might have 8 people, 12 people, 70 people meeting in one room. And then you go out to these little breakout rooms, which are like individual one-on-one conversations, or maybe you have 2 or 3 or 4 people in the room. And it gives you an opportunity with a set period of time, 10 or 15 minutes usually, to introduce yourself, to get introduced to somebody else. And I've got some tips specifically on this I'd love to share with your audience on for introverts. How do you handle this? Here's a problem with me and most introverts is there's a real problem with getting that conversation started and going, isn't it? And that's what I've always struggled with. And I've found ways to beat that, and I can give you some things, but it's kind of like a combination of structure and familiarity. This is really what it boils down to. If you have structure, and familiarity, the introvert can handle it well. That's why I can speak from the stage, but I have trouble in a conversation of 5 people sometimes because I know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But if I'm just going up to an unknown situation, there's no familiarity or there's no structure. And you can get both by pre-planning on your virtual networking. And I'd love to share some tips with your audience when you're ready.
Yeah, well, we'll do some tips here in a second. So I'm very interested because as I've been saying for the last 2 months, there are no empty seats, there are no back seats. So for the introverts, part of this thrust on the virtual stage is there's no hiding in the room. Now you can turn the camera off, but we don't recommend that because then you're not going to be able to network. Then you're really not going to be able to engage. So part of the tension here is turn on the camera, show your face, take a breath, and jump into those breakout sessions, those virtual events. Start there because the introverts can't even turn on the camera. They don't even want to turn on the microphone. So give us some of those tips of how you can start diving in a little bit deeper every time.
Well, honestly, turning on the camera is just one of those things that I'm just going to lay it out. You're just going to have to do it and walk through it. It's kind of like you get thrown off the horse and it's like, I don't know if I get back on that beast, but I'm going to get back on the beast because I want to learn how to ride the horse. You have to choose what's more important to you. And some things are just hard in life. And I'd love to give you a simple tip. Like, this will make everything easy to turn the camera. No, you know what's easy to turn the camera? Turn on the camera. Yeah, it's that simple. Yes, it's hard. But sometimes it takes a little bit of courage. It takes courage to start a business. It takes courage to start a conversation. But to begin the conversation in the first place, like you just said, Trigger, you have to turn on the camera and face somebody. If I'm in a room, I actually have to walk across the room and talk to somebody. If I'm in a virtual networking situation, I have to turn on the camera and talk to somebody. And there are ways to make that conversation more effective for the introvert. But yeah, you kind of got to get the camera on first. Otherwise, it's like you're still sitting in the corner. See, I went to the networking event, but I never left my corner with my can of Coke. You never talked to anybody the whole time. Yeah, you went to the networking meeting, but it was ineffective for you. It did not advance your business or your life forward one bit. And that's not the end result you want from a networking meeting. You do have to take courage.
Events, so these virtual get-togethers, because you've done them. I know you get the people together. You kind of launch it off and do the icebreaker and do a little pre-coaching or set up whatever you're going to do to it. And then maybe you throw out a question. You know, all of you go out and discuss this question, come back with your answers. So take us through that when you kind of throw it out and you shuffle the deck and you put them in their breakout rooms. What happens in those breakout rooms?
Yeah, great question. So here's the first thing I suggest. This is what I do is for an introvert, and I got this idea originally from a Forbes article from a few years back. And it gives like 5 things you can do. Be the greeter, public speaking, stage acting, humble inquiry, be prepared. It's like 5 little techniques that an introvert can use to kind of get out there more in the networking world, but it applies to virtual networking just as much. And being the greeter is what you're talking about. In other words, you say, hi, my name's Steve Coombes. What's your name? Oh, what do you do? How did you find this virtual networking? You start asking questions. Instead of you being put on the spot, it's like, oh, what's my elevator pitch? I can't remember the words. Forget that. Yeah, it's good to know, but forget that for right now. Give your name and get interested in somebody else, because believe me, anytime you're interested in somebody else, that makes you interesting to them, because everybody loves to talk about themselves to somebody who is genuinely interested. So show genuine interest, and here's how you prepare. You ask their name, you ask what they do, prepare some questions in advance. Like, what kind of resources would you find most helpful today? What's the #1 challenge you're facing in your business this year? If you could get anything out of this meeting, what would that be? Who would you like to be introduced to? You're building contacts. You might be able to introduce them to somebody. How about if the next 12 months work perfectly for you, where would your business be at in 12 months? Now, these are some deeper questions. It may not be as efficient for a 10-minute conversation because you're probably going to take half of that. But again, have a list of questions and pull 1 or 2 out, and that'll be enough to have a great conversation going. And you can kind of measure from the conversation what's the most appropriate question to bring out. If you have a handful of questions prepared in advance, you're going to have plenty to talk about, and you're going to show genuine interest, giving people something really meaty to talk about and not superficial. It'll build a relationship.
So is that up to the host to do that, or is that one of those things you send a pre-questionnaire out? So let's say people sign up for the webinar. You're going to do your virtual roundtable, and Do you send that out as part of the welcome to the show and they know what's coming? Or do you as a host just say, before this next breakout, here's your theme? Which way do you do this?
I've done it all three ways. And here's the three ways. Number one, if I'm hosting, for example, my Solopreneur Success Connections community, we have twice a month virtual networking. And as a facilitator, I don't go to the breakout rooms. I send people off. But for example, we had one yesterday. I said, one of the questions was that, like, what's your number one challenge in your business right now? And ask your partner, your one-on-one partner, that question while you're talking to them. So that was kind of pre-set up. But I would ask questions like that when I go to a general virtual networking where I'm participating as a standard participant. And I go to other virtual networking meetings besides my own, so I can participate because I love talking to people. And in those times, I will do that exact thing. I won't wait till somebody tells me for a topic. I'll just start asking them questions. And I have these questions kind of up here now, but I started by thinking about it ahead of time. Preparing, there's your structure, and knowing what you're going to talk about, that's familiarity. It helps the introvert out. The third instance is what I would call, you call this meeting virtual coffee. And that's funny because I actually do virtual one-on-one coffees all the time.
Yes.
And I use them to get to meet new people, especially people I meet on LinkedIn or people that join my community so I can have a conversation with them and get to know them more personally. I said, it's just a 15-minute chat, often turning like 30 minutes because we get to blabbing away and we have a great time. But I try to make it 15 minutes to respect people's time, but we just get to talking and get to know them better. And I ask them questions like, well, what kind of resources can I direct you to? Who would you best, be introduced to? I mean, if I could introduce you to anybody, who would be helpful for me to introduce you to? Those kind of questions I'll ask because often at the end of this virtual coffee, there's somebody I can make an introduction for them or a couple people, or perhaps there is a good resource I can direct them to. Notice here's the key. And I think solopreneurs especially need to be careful here. Don't try to sell on these short little conversations. You're not selling anything. I'm not trying to sell anybody squat. If you're a good relationship, I might tell you what, let's talk another time about what I do. I might be able to help you in this area, but that's not my goal when I have these conversations. The goal of the conversation is a conversation that builds a relationship. And I do that by serving the person I'm talking to, simply providing resources, providing introductions, whatever I can do, and learning about them. That's what the purpose of these conversations are. And you say, well, I'm not selling anything. Pause. You will, because when you build a strong relationship and you help people get what they want, it's always going to pay off in the end. They may not be a direct customer, but it'll always come back to help you. That's just the way life works. So use that.
So with the virtual stage, you are still rubbing shoulders. The virtual business card is now the chat box. The virtual business card, you drop your email link in, you give them something, but you don't give them the full Monty, here's my ad campaign, here's what I want from you. You don't do the big sales pitch. You simply change the virtual business card, right?
I don't even go that far. I would say, let's connect on LinkedIn. And then once we're connected on LinkedIn, I'll say, I'd love to continue our conversation. Would you like to chat again? If so, let me know. I'll send you my calendar link. And I've got this special calendar link that I set up. And it goes to Calendly. It's tied to my Google Calendar, and it gives times that are available. And they just pick a time that matches my schedule that works for them. And we have it automatically set up a Zoom meeting. And here's another little nice touch that I did. I had to use a Calendly Pro to do this, but to me, it's well worth the $15 a month or whatever it is. It sends the person after they set up the meeting to my website to a thank you page. So I can personally say, thank you, Joe, for signing up for my calendar. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. It's not a super long sales letter. It's not selling anything. It just tells them a little bit about who Steve Coombes is so they can get to know who they're talking to when they meet me, and a little bit about what I stand for, what I'm about, what I'm doing, just a really brief bio, just a short page. And it makes me real to them as a real person. And I've had multiple people say, I love what you're doing here. It really makes this personal. And that's my goal. Just make it personal. I want to build real relationships, not these superficial, I'm connected to 40,000 people on LinkedIn. Whoop-de-doo, you don't know anybody. Who do you know really? That's what I want, is to meet people and know them.
So you just hit a really key point. As sole entrepreneurs, we wear every hat. Like I said way back in the introduction, we're sales, we're marketing, we're Twitter, we're content, we're self-promotion. We are set up, tear down a lot of times by ourselves. But you just talked about automating. You just talked about a system to help you as a sole entrepreneur. You have Calendly, which I use as well, and you pay a little bit more to get this other feature. You throw it someplace else to get that next layer. you don't have a virtual secretary. You have that built in as your virtual secretary. What other tricks and tips do you have like that we can add those virtual elements behind the scenes to help us stay focused on the real job?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And here's the thing, as a solopreneur, we are, in a sense, a business of one, but it doesn't mean we're alone. And I do take advantage also, by the way, of virtual assistants. I have a terrific VA out in the Philippines who's been doing editing of my podcast. Although she just let me know yesterday that she has to take a leave because she just has some health issues and she's overwhelmed. And I said, that's fine. You take all the time you need. And funny thing is, my networking yesterday already had a couple of suggestions on who I can use in the meanwhile. So I already taken care of that. Oh, I needed somebody to edit some videos for me. Somebody in my networking gave me a resource who I just talked to today. I'm going to have them doing some video editing for me because that's not my wheelhouse. I've done it, but I'm slow. No, sir. I will tell you what, yours is one of the videos I need to edit for yesterday. So yeah, you want to edit your own video? Go ahead, Trigger. It's some extra details, right? But automating things. Yeah. So my member site, for example, I have a membership site. Much of that takes upfront setup, but once it's set up, it handles the billing automatically. I don't have to manually run somebody's credit card or send them an invoice or ask for PayPal. It just handles everything behind the scenes, and I'm good to go. It handles the emails. I can write an email through AWeber, set to go out. So there's lots of different systems and tools you can use. I interact with my VAs. I use Trello, which is tool you can use for free, and it's very powerful. And I set that up to handle for example, my podcast. I have a whole series of checklists. I'm a big believer in checklists. You don't forget things, and use those checklists. And I have certain people mark them off. My wife is my designer, but she has her own set of checklists, except for the one that I marked. Steve approved the graphic for the show. My VA for the editing has a series of checklists. What did they do? And Steve approves it the last one, so I know it's done. And there's 7 whole checklists just for every episode that comes through. And we use Trello to manage it all. Sets deadlines, does reminders, everything.
Well, and Trello is something I use, and when I stumbled upon it, it was this virtual board. It's like Post-it notes, sort of. It's a very flexible. You drop, drag, move. You can put timers on it. You can color code it. You can drop in documents and links. It's an unbelievable resource. And if you're not using it as a solopreneur, you're missing out on an absolute golden thing to help you as a thought leader, as a producer, as a creator. It really is one of the best things out there.
Yeah, and if somebody like they're starting a podcast or they're running one, it's just kind of overwhelming, and you want to see how that works, just hey, connect with me on LinkedIn. Say, hey, Steve, I'd like to do a virtual coffee. Can you show me how this Trello thing works? I'll just walk you through it. I'll share my screen, and you want to see how it's done, I'll show you how it's done. It's not that difficult. And matter of fact, I've had a couple people ask, I should probably just create a blank board for podcasters and just, here you go, just give it to them and they can have it. I should probably just do that and make that public because a lot of people can benefit. And I'm happy to do so.
So what are some of the landmines of not to do? We talk about a lot to do, but as solopreneurs, what are the things that we should avoid, especially in this day and age of everyone's jumping online, everyone's recreating their careers. Every day I talk to people, they're like, I can't go back to my job. I have to reinvent myself. What are some things not to do that will probably burn bridges, just make it harder to get the ball really rolling?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, so take it from me, I've made some mistakes. So let me think of a couple here that I can maybe help you avoid. One thing is, don't try to do too much at one time because it's very easy to do scattershot and you have no effect. Here's what happens. You shoot at one target, one goal today, and you're more likely to hit it than you do this. You may hit the target, but it's piecemeal. You're not going to get a big impact. If you want impact, don't try to create 14 different products up front. Don't try to do 3 different streams of income up front. Make one stream of income, solidify that, automate it as much as possible, then go to number 2. Then go to number 3, follow a process. Another huge mistake, you're a solopreneur, don't do it alone. I don't know how many times I can tell you this and still need to tell you 100 more times, but because I've done this so many times, don't think you have to learn everything from scratch on your own in order to have made it, because you can make it, but why reinvent the wheel? There's people out here ahead of you. you say, well, I need to be unique. Okay, yes, you need a unique selling point, a unique perspective. Your own voice makes you unique, the way you approach problems, the way you approach solutions. But you don't have to do everything from scratch. Please don't take everything from scratch. You're just going to spend so much time wasting and spinning your wheels, relearning stuff that other people already learned. Find somebody who you can trust that will support you. And by the way, support needs to come in a couple of formats. One, from people who are, you might call an expert, somebody who really knows what you're trying to learn when it comes to skill set. But the other kind of support is literally people who support you. Do you have a family member, a friend, or somebody who say, look, I'm behind you on this. I know it's a tough day. You know, they're not going to sit there and criticize you, because it's easy to criticize. Get somebody who's in your house and giving you a hug. I know it's coronavirus, but get a hug anyways, right? Whatever it takes to keep you motivated, because you're going to have some tough days when you're building a business. Maybe it's a virtual hug, maybe it's an email, or just or a phone call, or a Zoom face-to-face. But have somebody or a couple of people that you know that you can reach out to on a regular basis, and you can kind of say, hey, this is what's going on, and you can be honest with them and know you're going to be a straight shooter. They're not going to like sugarcoat things for you, but they're going to be supportive. That's the kind of people you need around you. That's kind of like your personal environment. You need the right kind of environment. I'm blessed that I have a wife who's very supportive of me in my business, but you need to have somebody in your corner that's going to support you, whoever it is, whether it's a spouse or friend or coworker. Even if you're building a business and you work still at your job, whatever it is, get somebody in your corner. That's big.
Where's the focus for the sole entrepreneur right now? Virtually is the game, but everyone wants to get back out in the real world again. So let's talk about leveraging this platform virtually as a solopreneur. How do you leverage this to when the doors open, they go back out? What are some practical steps that Steve thinks that may help us to best leverage the now for the great future?
Yeah, so I will tell you this. I've always been pretty much virtual. When I started copywriting, for example, I started in 2007. When I was laid off in 2009, I went full-time then. And from the beginning, I've rarely met my clients, because most solopreneurs, if you build a location-independent business, you're probably doing something digitally, or you're able to travel, although right now it's a little harder, but you're able to have independence on where you perform your business function from, whatever that is. In my case, it was writing. Now it's coaching. And I do both actually at this time. Other people maybe you're a photographer, so you have to go somewhere. Either you're photographing a person, or you're photographing locations, or perhaps you're a graphic designer. That's probably completely location independent. Maybe you are a virtual assistant and you just do editing somebody's podcast, for example, like my VA does. Whatever that is, don't feel like you're trapped by virtual technologies. Rather, look at it as a tool that you can continue to use now all the way through the rest of the future of your business. Because this series of tools we've been building, whether it's online teleconferencing platforms like Zoom or whatever you use, whether it's email. Obviously, email's been around for how many years now? Since the 90s at least. Bulletin boards before then. So we've been around for a while now. But guess what? They continue to grow and they evolve in the complexity and the capabilities, but they're still at the core of them all, they're communication tools. And the point of communication is to make a connection with another human being in some way. And as long as you use those tools to make the connection, you're good.
So I was thinking back to those bulletin boards. AOL, the big squeal in the background of AOL. You could not sell pictures. You could barely do the text, all that stuff back in the old days. Now you can do video. As a solopreneur, video is so key. The studies show text-driven content, a couple hits. A picture with your content, more hits. You had a video, movement, and the hits go up and up and up. The engagement level goes up. So those have been the evolution right now. So talk about the engagement of video as we should use it as sole entrepreneurs. You have to produce it, create it, post it, all that stuff together. What have you learned about that?
Well, I will learn this, that I haven't learned as much about video yet as I need to know. This is an area that I'm still growing in. And you're further along that path than I am, Trigger. So I'm glad you asked that one. I've been a words-based guy for such a long time. I've kind of got my hands around the pictorial format a little bit more. Video is an area that I agree with you. We need to focus on as solopreneurs more, because that is an opportunity to grasp people's attention. If we have an attention span of a gnat or less, then we need to have a way to capture that attention. But what really captures people's attention isn't the constant movement as much as you get their attention first. That's your hook. But they need to have some good juicy bait. That's your content that keeps them there. They need to know they're getting value for, yeah, you got their attention to start with, but you need to deliver the value or there's no reason for them to stick around. So it's kind of a combination of the two. And that's always the case. You have to deliver value. I sent an email to my community just this morning talking about that. You have to deliver on what is this something they want to actually open up and read. If it's an email, is it a video that once they start watching, here's a funny thing. Here's another statistic. I'm not sure if you know, but YouTube videos, if you get somebody to watch more than 2 minutes, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
But when you have a podcast, because you're not tied to a visual thing, they can do other activities, whether it's driving, washing the dishes and doing housework or yard work, whatever it is. And you might have your voice in their ear for 40, 60 minutes at a shot. So podcasts are a very powerful platform, even though there's no visual whatsoever. You're not reading, you're not looking at pictures, you're not looking at video, but it's all auditory. But it's your voice in their ear, building a relationship with them for an extended period of time. I've become a huge fan of podcasts and audio delivered formats. And I'm an audiobook listener and a podcast consumer. So that's worked very efficiently for me, even though I'm a visual person. I love listening to things so I can double duty. If I'm driving on a road trip, I'm listening to stuff. It's always helpful.
The thing about that is you can shoot the video, peel off the audio, and turn it into a podcast. So you can do the both and that's one of the benefits of this. You can do a vlog, and so then you can also do the podcast version. Very simple to do it. So you're double dipping and spreading yourself out. You do the one time, get a twofer out of it. As a solopreneur, that's a great thing.
Yeah, somebody who's doing that really well is Brandon Burchard. He's a really well-known coach, and he's knocking out of the park. He's one of the best coaches in the world, and he actually takes his live stage presentations and does like clips and puts them on the podcast. It might be like 3 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever that segment is that makes sense. It delivers a message in that segment and it turns into a podcast episode. And that's a powerful way. That just makes sense. You create the content once, but you can repurpose it in multiple ways to reach people where they are at the time they need to hear it or see it. That's how you do that. And you can be very effective that way. You can turn articles into a book, blog posts into a book. You can turn books into audio books. You can turn those into podcast episodes, videos, all this stuff kind of interrelates. It's all part of your business. Take advantage of your content. Don't just do it one time and say, okay, I did that. I can't touch it again. Reuse it. You may have to take some time to edit it a little bit, but it's easier than reinventing the wheel.
Well, I know we've got listeners here today, so I want to get the chance for them to pop on their mic, pop on the camera, and ask Steve a question. Again, he's a professional coach, sole entrepreneur expert. If you have a question, and if you want to use the chat box, use the chat box. If you are doing multitasking and you do not necessarily want to, or you can't turn on the camera because the dog and the kid in the background are going on, but feel free to type that in or kick on the camera and jump on into the conversation here. We don't want to leave your personal questions out of the conversation, but there's so much about solo entrepreneurs. It takes energy. It takes strength. What keeps Steve going? What powers you up every day when you're like, I got those 3 things to do, and I really don't want to do them today, but I got to do those 3 things. What powers you up and gets you going?
You know what? I started business, and why I wanted a business in the first place of my own is control. And here's the real bottom line. The control is so that I can have the time and the money to spend on my family. When I started really getting serious about my first successful solopreneur business, what really turned the corner for me was a single incident. I remember it clear as day, even though it was, 12 years ago now, and 13 years. 13 years. Wow. So here's the thing. I was working an IT guy in a company, Fortune 1000 company, PC Connection actually, and I was not making a whole lot of money. I was making okay money, kind of like middle 50,000, 60,000. I forget what I was making in those days, but I said, I need to make a little bit more money. So I'm running out the door late to go to an interview. And my son, who's, he's 17 now, almost 17, 18, 17 years old. Well, try to keep track of these guys. I got 7 kids, so bear with me. So anyway, he says, that, he comes along to give me a kiss, and I'm giving a little side hug and keep on running towards the door because I'm running late for the interview. And I heard his brother, who was like 5, turn around and say, Elijah, Daddy doesn't have the time to give you a kiss right now. And it just broke my heart. And I was driving like an hour to go to an interview. And I said, I'm going to drive, be another 2 hours a day away from my family, 10 hours a week for what, maybe $1,000 increase, which will have to be eaten up in gas. What am I doing this for? What am I really doing this for? And I said, I got to get serious about this writing thing, which was the business I was pursuing at that point. And that motivated me. Matter of fact, I wrote down on a yellow sticky note, I wrote, Daddy doesn't have time to give you a kiss right now. I put it on my wall with a date. And I said, I'm never again going to tell my family I don't have time for you because I'm racing up to some stupid interview that I don't even care about the job or the company or what I'm doing there. I'm just trying to make a couple extra dollars. I don't need that. You got to have a real reason why. That was my reason why. That was my turning point. And I still get emotional to this day, even though it's 13 years later.
Does that carry you through the long days now, or is there something else? Question coming in on the chat box here. Thanks for the question coming in. How do you get ready for online presence and presentation? I'll let you take that one, Steve, as a solopreneur. How do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm a kind of person that prepares a lot. I have literally in front of me, I've got you on the screen. This is virtual. So I actually have Word over on one side and Zoom on this side. And I have notes and like several pages of notes over on this side that I could go through and flip through. I could actually just scroll my mouse and I could see any page like that quick, lightning quick, if I want to pull something up to kind of a refresher. It's almost like having a teleprompter, but it's right in front of me because I'm here at the computer. I like to be very well prepared ahead of time if I'm going to do a presentation. Now, this is kind of like a free-flowing conversation, but at the same time, I still spent, even for this conversation, I spent hours preparing in advance because I wanted to make sure that Trigger doesn't bring Steve Coombes on and says, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I spent hours preparing this conversation. Why? Because it's important to me anytime if somebody cares enough to invite Steve Coombes onto their platform, I want to show value. Now, who is the value for? The value is for you, and thank you for the question. The value is, what can I do to prepare for you? And I'm going to look at this question here so if I can parse this out a little bit. It says, how do you get ready for online presentations? I actually have a checklist. It's over across the room, I apologize. I have a checklist that I follow because it's online, right? I have a sign that's outside my door. It says, recording in progress. Please don't disturb. I even have a little sticky note that says, please don't take a shower right now because it takes so much noise. My microphone might pick it up because the bathroom's the next room over. I'm actually in a bedroom office. So that works for me. And I put a sign up and I tell the family, I have a call at this time. Can you keep the noise down? I've got 7 kids. Got to remind them, right? So I remind them, and that's one thing I do. I have checklists that I follow. I have checklists to make sure I have my lights on. I have 2 lights on either side of me. I have a ring light right over the monitor here. So I have good lighting at all times, no matter what the weather's like. And it's hot today, so I have the blinds closed. I just have artificial lighting, but I try to use good lighting. I don't use an artificial backdrop behind me. I'm just not comfortable with it because it sometimes gives me artifacts as far as my head moves. And I feel like it's growing out of my head. I don't want to do that. So I figure, hey, real world is behind me. I could probably straighten that up a bit more and improve on that. That's okay. What else do I do to get ready for presentation? Oh, here's a big one, especially if it's like networking. I have a list. I mean, actually, it's a form. Here's my current form. And I write down, let me get that in front of you, name, date, contact info, source, business function, like what do they do? How can I support them? I remind them. I have checkboxes of ways that I might best move forward with that relationship. And I even at the bottom, I have like little, you probably can't read that smaller print, but what's the level of likelihood that I might be able to provide them a service that'll be of value to them. So basically it's like a prospect rating for me, but that's okay. Even if it's like a 0 and not probably going to be a prospect for me, it doesn't mean I cut off the relationship. It's just a matter of me knowing where they're at so I can best support them and not waste my time, promoting stuff to them that they don't want or need. I hope that answers the question. If not, please feel free to follow up.
That's a great question, Nakia. Thank you, by the way, because my preparation is a little bit different than Steve, which is good. You get the both in. I am more the ad lib, free flow. My stuff, being a broadcaster, being a speaker, I've been doing this on this side of the microphone for a very long time. Steve's done more of the writing, producing side of it. So for me, it's energy. It is the presentation. I have to make sure I am jacked up. I'm ready to go. I have music going always before this camera goes on, there's music streaming for me. I need that energy. And so it is part of my presentation. It makes my personality come to life. I definitely read before I get on, not just about what I'm going to deliver here, but there's always the topic of the day. There's always the stuff of the day. So you never know when you're doing one of these interviews, discussion panels, especially if I'm the guest. I never know what they're going to throw at me. We have some list. There's always the preparation question. I sent Steve some ideas of here's kind of where we might frame this up today. Steve begins to prepare his side of the coin. However, if something big happens that is connected to this conversation, it's going to happen today. And it's great to be prepared on the current news and events, so I know I can slide into that in real time. It adds value to that moment where everyone's thinking about that thing. And so some of my prep is not even about this, but it's about more of this to keep it a bigger thing. And then I do the checklist. If I got to make sure the right virtual screen is on for me, I have about 10 different screens depending on which interview or conversation I am. I like changing the environment. The environment works for me. This is important for Rich to do what he does. It is an illusion, but it works for me. So again, I try to do things to help set that stage for the guest, for me, and is part of that preparation. The other thing is, just before we went on today, my computer shut down. It did an automatic reboot and updated software. Now I always have all my software stuff turned off, so it doesn't automatically do that. For some reason today, it bypassed the protection that I have built in, and literally a minute before it was rebooting and recycling. I make sure I do all those updates before every show. I really recommend everybody do that. That everyone literally takes the time to make sure you are fresh. Zoom's updating daily. Google's updating daily. Facebook's updating daily. Whatever platform you use, you better make sure you're at the peak of it so it presents well, because you will get bumped out. Zoom just said the end of this month, if you're using the previous versions, it won't toggle in anymore. You have to go to 5 point whatever it is. So I always make sure I'm current on all my software. Great question, though. Wonderful, wonderful question. Follow-up question there. How do you handle when that happens? What do you tell the audience that you can't get on time? I sent Steve an off-air message, first of all, saying, here's the deal. And he was like, well, I'm jumping on right now. So he was in the room virtually, and then I jumped on in. So you can do off-air stuff. I also did grab my phone. Always have a backup. I have Zoom on my phone. I have Zoom on my iPad. I've never used this phone for a live on-air stream interview. You can do it. It's made for it. But I told Steve, in fact, I found him on the call this way first and said, hi, I'm here. How does it look? And we did a quick test. We almost did the show with my phone today. So you always need to have a backup. Anything else you would add, Steve, on when stuff?
Yeah, I sure do. As a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier, I'm a fan of checklists. I have a pre-call checklist. I'm just going to read you real quick what my checklist looks like. And if anybody's interested in this, let me know. Just join, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send it to you happily. Pre-call checklist, hardware. Check my boom mic power supply is on. Check my mic input that's actually plugged in the computer. Check speaker output, headset earphones. Also, I started using Bluetooth recently, so I turned those on before. Check laptop power supply is charging, and hate for the computer to die in the middle of a call. Software bandwidth, I turn off notifications like Hangouts, pause my Dropbox, pause my OneDrive, pause Iris, which is a program I use to turn off the blue light in my screen. I sign out in busy Skype so I don't get an unexpected call in the middle of another call. Noise, I close my windows, turn off external speakers, turn off fans, air filter, air conditioner, turn off my phone ringer, notify family of call, post recording in progress sign, those things I mentioned earlier. And then personal visual, closet door shut, backdrop clear. Check hair, face, shirt, fresh water available. You probably see me take a couple sips. HD lights are on, and in big bold, ensure cloud recording turned on with like 3 exclamation points, because I made the mistake once of doing an entire podcast interview, and then at the end, like, oh no, because I had paused it and never turned it back on. So I just set it to record everything. I don't care. I can trim it later. I have die and make that mistake again. So make sure you turn on cloud recording if you're going to do something that you need to reuse. And the best thing is to turn it on to be automatic by default and turn it off manually.
Follow-up question on that, Steve, from the chat box again. How much time does it take to do all that? How much back time? Because the back time preparation before you go on, and always as a host or as a guest, I highly recommend you get on 5 minutes early to make sure that you have good stuff. At least 5 minutes early to any show. Never show up at the last second. But how much time do you allow for all those back check things that you just mentioned?
I usually start getting ready about 15 minutes before the call. It takes me probably 3 to 5 minutes to do all those little things I just mentioned in my whole checklist. Some of them are already done. Click, couple lights, push a button, this light's on, make sure the windows are closed. Those kind of things are very quick to do, especially when you've done them again and again. But having the checklist kind of helps you make sure you didn't forget anything. And when I've not used a checklist, I have forgotten things. That's why I use checklists. I agree with a trigger completely. You want to get on early if at all possible. I try to get on 5 to 10 minutes early. I know I'd heard from Trigger that he was having no difficulty with the restart and all going on. So I waited, I think it was like 3 to 5 minutes before the call. I jumped on at that point and I was ready, however. And Trigger was here like right about the same exact time I got here. And it was funny because this camera's going to this number. You just get things reset up. But, we got it working. And that's sometimes, whether you're, Trigger said this yesterday in the training he did for my community, things happen. That's life. You just got to roll with it and you pick up and you keep moving forward. Don't let it throw you. We're all people. People make mistakes. Things happen. Technology flunks. You just keep on rolling with it. All you can do is learn from the experiences, maybe add it to your checklist. And at that point, you can just keep moving forward.
This brings me to another question here real quickly, Steve, before we let you tell us more about you, how to get in touch with you, all that fun, exciting stuff.
Yeah.
As sole entrepreneurs, I have learned save everything. If I'm creating content, if I'm doing a practice, if I'm doing a document like you just showed us, create files, create names, create things that you can file folders. So I have the Defy the Odds message, which I speak on. I've got a whole file folder just on Defy the Odds. I've got now Rock the Virtual Stage, which is a separate endeavor. And then I also have the business, like the budget streets. I've got the invoicing. Talk about that for a second, just the organizational side of a solopreneur, because the more you get into this, the more organized you have to be to do this.
Yeah, that's I'll try to keep it brief because I could go on and long about that. Let's talk about that and the way, I guess file folders might be a way to approach organization. You kind of alluded to that. I use Dropbox. I use OneDrive because I have Microsoft Office subscription, but primarily Dropbox for my files. So everything that's important pretty much goes into Dropbox because it gives you an automatic backup. I've used, I've used Mozy, which was bought out by Carbonite, which is like online cloud backups of your files. So if you're not using something like Dropbox, have an online backup, because if your hard drive fails or somebody steals your computer, you don't want to be stuck with all your stuff gone. That's the horrible thing to happen to you. Make sure you have a cloud-based backup somewhere, and that's what I do with Dropbox. I have multiple business segments. I have my coaching business. I have my writing business. I'm an instructor for American writers and artists. And I also have multiple clients in the writing and coaching businesses. So I have separate folders based on these different areas. I have folders set up for my podcast, folders set up for my community. So there's a structure behind it all. And you just kind of have to think about logically, how do you access these files? If they're interrelated, you might have a top folder and then you break them down in like a tree, right? And that's what I do with mine. I have a Solopreneur coach file, which is all my coaching and community stuff. And then within that, I have the podcast and other things. Because I have the Solopreneur Success podcast, kind of falls under the coaching part of my business. My writing is completely separate. I have a projects folder, and those are broken down by individual writing clients. And I just happen to lump AWAI, which is my client that I'm an instructor for. I put them under my projects folder. This works for me. So that's just one way you could break that apart. What most is important to you is, can you find what you need when you need to find it? That's really what it comes down to. So whatever makes sense to you is fine, as long as you can find it and you're not like, some people's desk is like a crazy mess and like, I know where everything's at. Do you really? If you do, fantastic, but have some kind of system in place. Doesn't matter what it is, just make sure it's something that works for you.
And this goes back to earlier in our conversation. So if you're coming in late, if you're watching on replay, go back earlier We talked about Trello. Trello is one of those great organizational systems. Again, you can do clips, you can do links, you can do videos, you can dump in content, organize it, move it. You can do it by dates. There's so many different ways to use that type of a tool to help do exactly what Steve was talking about. And it's all kind of file or post-it note driven, depending on how your brain thinks of that. But go back earlier and you will get some great stuff on Trello, Trello.com. Steve, great having you on. Tell us a little bit more about how our people can get in touch with you, both now and on playback as well.
Yeah, of course. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. Steve Coombes is my, Steve, S-T-E-V-E, Coombes, C-O-O-M-B-E-S. So you do it linkedin.com/Steve Coombes. You'll find me. My website is solopreneurcoach.com. And if you can't spell solopreneur, I'm sorry. It's a tough one sometimes for people. It's SOLOPRENEUR.com. Solopreneurcoach.com, my mistake. So that's where you'll find the podcast, the community, and you can, find the Meet Steve page there and just request a virtual coffee. I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. If you heard like a checklist you'd like to have a copy of, or you want to see the Trello board we talked about earlier about how I manage my podcasts and organize that and use checklists and such and work with VAs, any of that kind of material, I'm happy to share it freely. Just let me know. And I'll be happy to send you a copy of it or demonstrate it for you, the usage on a virtual coffee. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Well, our time is running to a close. Steve, before we do, type in your email or whatever the best way to get in touch with. Just drop it in the chat box there so people can cut and paste and make sure they get that. Again, Steve Coombes, the Solopreneur. He's a coach. He's an author. He's an expert. You can find him on Facebook, LinkedIn, all those different places. This will be on playback. There will be links always in the description, as always. And make sure you check out the other How to Rock the Virtual Stage previous ones. We also have the How to Rock the Stage, the Virtual Stage Facebook community that is growing. Right now it is open. It is free. We are working toward that's going to be a paid subscription as we continue to build up the content and build up what we're doing with that. So make sure you get in, share that with people that you know that need this type of material. The virtual stage is here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. And as solopreneurs, we can use this, we can leverage this for far more than even what Steve and I had the chance to talk about here. Parting shots from Steve. Any final comments, thoughts as we bring it to a close here, Steve?
Yeah, keep your chin up. Coronavirus is just temporary, and more importantly, people are here to stay. We're just need to build relationships and just keep your chin up, because I made it through the Great Recession. You'll make it through this. You can do this. I believe in you.
And if you want to save that chat, go over to the chat box, hit those three little dots, and you can download the chat to make you have all the notes, Steve's email, and things like that. You can save all that good information right there. And plus, if there's anything that was dropped in that we did not get to in this show, we will follow up offline and get back in touch with you again. So don't be afraid of that. So Steve, thank you much for your time, my friend. It's good being with you. I know you've got things to go do as well. Thanks for joining us here on the virtual stage. We'll be back live next week. Watch for us, follow us, like us, share it. And of course, anything we do to help you, just reach out, rich@richbontrager.net. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us on How to Rock the Virtual Stage.